All right. So this reminds me of the last 1.5, 2 years of instruction when I was online. Like, can you see my screen? Can y'all give me a thumbs up? All right. Um, so listen, I'm really, really excited to have this conversation and to dive in with you fine people. Um, Equity and justice and grading, um, and kind of just talking through some of the things that I think come up in education and how we can just be better for our students, be better for our world. And so I'll go through a couple of things here. What I want to say from the onset is, as we dive into this conversation, I really hope that we could um, engage in more of a dialogue than a monologue. I don't want to talk at you, right? I would love if you could interact and chat if that's your, if that's where you feel most comfortable. And we're also going to save about 15 or so minutes at the end for some Q&A. So I'm going to honor your time. The time is now 7:05. We're going to, 7:05 where I'm at. And we'll get into some Q&A at the end. So I saw somebody from Dallas and Fort Worth here. So I'm gonna give you a little bit about me, why I mentioned that. Obviously, I'm an educator, I'm an assistant principal, a coach and consultant, DEI practitioner. Here's where it comes in. I am a superhero nerd. So you may hear some Marvel and DC references in this presentation. I'm also a Dallas Cowboys fan, which means I'm well acquainted with pain and suffering. And most importantly, I'm a husband and a father. And the reason that I bring that up is because I think that it makes there's skin in the game for me. When we talk about these issues of equity and justice, I see it in the lives of my two kids. My son is 11. He's a lot like me. He lives in his head a lot and he thinks really, really hard, puts a lot of pressure on himself. And a grade means, you know what, Chris Evans, I will do that. Shout out to you. I think that he puts a lot of pressure on his back and a grade means a lot to him, but he doesn't necessarily get the significance right now outside of the fact that either he did well or he didn't do well. Right. And he doesn't. And so I want to talk about how we can use grading to promote a more just system. So when I talk about grading, here's what I mean. When we talk about grading, we're obviously talking about the way the teachers calculate, describe, and report student performance. Now, here's something that I found really, really important. According to the Education Advisory Board, 40% of traditional student grades include non-academic criteria. Now, when I say non-academic criteria, could you just drop in chat some of those things that you think I mean? What do I mean when I say that? Attitude, participation grade, absolutely. Compliance, absolutely. Skills, privilege, discipline. Yes, yes. So you guys, all of you are getting it. So I think about, so when I was going to school, and teachers had to write their grades in the report card. There wasn't like a digital thing that you looked up, and teachers actually had to write comments and things like that. And they included things like participation, and they included things like class participation, homework, and things like that in the grade. Now, I need you to think about this. When we talk about participation, on-time homework submission, things like that, we need to think about who gets disadvantaged as a result. Like, do our grading policies reflect the world that we see? And here's what I mean when I say that. If we are going to acknowledge that there is a need for equity in our world, right, giving our students what it is that they need to be successful, counteracting the inequity and the injustice we see in our world, right? The thing that happens inevitably, if we fail to acknowledge and account for that in the world, then we will perpetuate it in our classrooms. And so how does that work out? There are students that are in our classrooms, regardless of where you might be, who home lives reflect a need to take care of younger siblings. And so maybe they don't get the homework in on time. And then we say, okay, that's going to be reflected in your grade, but they actually do know and can attain to the standard that we're asking them to meet. And so when we grade for those types of things, we're saying that a student who got it in on time but didn't necessarily do it well and reflected in their grade is the same thing as a student who could not get in on time because of their situation and does attain to the standard. And so then what do our grades really reflect? Do our grades reflect what the student can do and what they presently know? Or do our grades reflect the privilege that our students come in with, and therefore we grade for privilege? And so I think those are questions that we really have to ask ourselves. That is, as an educator, am I doing the things that are necessary to ensure that I am promoting equity in my grading? I'm going to show you a picture here on the next slide, and we're just going to do a little notice and wonder. Anything you notice, anything you wonder about the picture that's in front of you? Drop it in chat. Let me know. And I am an educator, so wait time doesn't bother me. Same game, different options for different participants. Okay, I see you. This has the reality and liberation piece, where I often see only the equality and equity used. Yep. I like the panel that removes the obstacle. I've seen this before without the last panel. Yep. It's my first time seeing this version with the reality and liberation. Yep. Reality is often unfair with regards to opportunity. Agreed. I wonder what liberation will look like in a grading structure. You're asking such great questions. That is beautiful. Anybody else want to hear from more voices if we could? And if you're typing in, we'll acknowledge that. But I want to pose some things here. Assuming that we have a similar understanding, how would you, in say 3 or so words, describe or define the word liberation? Like when you see what's in the picture, like what does liberation mean to you? Free of obstacles, free of barriers. Absolutely. No fences. There it is. Absolutely. No fences or boundaries. Absolutely. Freedom to interact with the world in a way you prefer. Yeah. You should not get in the way of student learning. I see it. You're making that specific. I love that. Thank you. So open up doors to everyone. No limitations. The freedom to be, fully thrive regardless of identity. Absolutely. These are all great and fabulous answers. I have a huge confession. I can't stand this picture. Can I tell you why I can't stand this picture? The position of the students in relation to the game that they enjoy has not changed. Like for me, when I think about liberation, I think about the students who are watching the game, or the kids, or whoever's on the outside watching the game, taking part in it. I think about the position that they have relative to this game that they enjoy, right? Whatever the game is, whether it be opportunity, whether that game be a job, a business, whatever it is, they get to do that thing. So when I think about liberation, yes, the fence is gone, but they're no longer there. You see them in the game. And so the point that I want to bring up here is that sometimes we don't move for equity in the ways that we should because our dream isn't big enough. Like our vision for equity isn't large enough. And so, yes, we provide people with the resources that fit their circumstances, but they are they are active participants and they're no longer on the outside. The problem with equity is we want to remove the barriers, but we don't necessarily want to move people into the places where they're going to be active participants in something. And the same thing happens with our grade books. Think about grading for a second. Grading is like the one place, for most parts, right? In my experience, I'll speak for this. In my experience, grading has been the one place where you can kind of, as an educator, have autonomy, right? You can exist on your own little island. And so your grades symbolize or embody your beliefs. And now we're talking about an educational landscape that doesn't necessarily look like or doesn't necessarily have the same beliefs that the generations coming in do. Right? You think about education and how we, I'll speak for myself, how I learned it. Right? We were in rows. We did group work on special occasions. You had to raise your hand every single time that a question was asked if you wanted a good grade. And how you replied, how you questioned. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Let me pause real quick and acknowledge that. What about reality? Can we change that perceived perception that students have of themselves? I agree with that. I agree with that. I think that, and let me pause here because I think this is really important. When we talk about the reality of where our kids are and the perceptions that they have of themselves, the switch, if we will, isn't going to come merely from us saying that they've adopted a quote victim mentality. It comes from acknowledging the greatness that we see in them and reaffirming that continually. It comes from us acknowledging and seeing that what we can't do is ignore the realities of the barriers, but we can say that barrier is no match for who you are and your identity and what you can do. Right. And so even if the perception is like the last kid who's in a ditch, right? Well, you don't have to stay there because these things are existing in who you are. And if we continue to work and cultivate the genius that is inside you, we'll begin to see these things progress. But I also don't want it to progress to where they're still on the other side of the fence and the boxes help them see over the fence. I don't want to progress to where the fence is no longer there and they're still on the outside of the game. I want them involved. And I hope that helps us to dream better with regard to equity. So again, grading, we now can exist on our own island. And I see this all the time with educators. A grade means something. And so for some educators, their belief informs how they begin to interact with their students, how they begin to grade, and then they don't necessarily account for the things that are going to promote those equity and promote that justice. Absolutely. Absolutely. The comment in the chat says, it is us coming into the classroom when they say, I can't, and we look at them and say, why not? What a crazy notion to think. Absolutely. That belief is so, so important. It's so, so important. So typically when I talk about equity, people have the misconception or they believe certain things about equality. Both are important, but they are distinct, right? So we talk about equality, we're talking about people getting the same resources and opportunities. To give you a picture of this, when the pandemic hit and we were forced to have to reframe all of what we did in education, the first thing that people did with the COVID money that they got, the schools did with the COVID money, is they gave every single kid a Chromebook, a device, to get access, to begin to see them come on and be a part of our classrooms. But you know what they didn't ask? Do you have adequate Wi-Fi? Right? And some schools, don't be wrong, some districts did that. But again, some of it was reactionary. Oh my gosh, there's another barrier. We can't just give them a device. We now have to give them the Wi-Fi to begin to access. Is it adequate enough to handle the bandwidth of Zoom? Right? Are they going to be delayed? Can they get the information? How are we going to give them these things? Right? So equality was handing everybody a Chromebook. Equity is what do you need to be able to access this in the way that that makes sense for you. And so everybody has different circumstances. And so we have to adapt to that. When you think about that in regards to our grade book, I think more times than not in education, we grade for equality. Our systems are set up that we set up a standard and we say, this is what it is. And you have to get to this standard and you have to do this thing versus saying, okay, what is the objective that the students have to meet? And am I grading them against this objective or how they get there, what they do? So I want to give you some questions, and then I want to get into the pillars, if you will, of grading for equity. Absolutely. Let me acknowledge what's in chat. We also need to acknowledge the systems that they've been in that have sold them the message counter to that message. Absolutely. There is a story that is happening, if you will, a narrative that is being told outside of what may be happening in your classrooms. And we only have a certain number of hours, certain number of minutes with our students, and they go out into a world that tells them, a lot of them, if they are from marginalized backgrounds, that they are less than, that they can't do it, that there are barriers to them doing it. That doesn't mean that they need to buy into it. Hear me. But it is a reality that we need to acknowledge if we're going to tackle the problem. Right? If I know that the change in my life is predicated upon me acknowledging the conditions that I'm in, if we do that with anything, our health, right? I can't then say, all right, I'm going to get in better health, but I don't understand where I'm at and what needs to improve. In the same way, if we're going to do this, have that with our children, have it with our students, then we need to be acknowledge where they're coming from and the stories, the narratives that are being told, so we can actually have an adequate counter narrative. Mr. Evans said, so I don't assign homework. I know it's not a level playing field. I don't know what everyone's home life is like to do the homework. I got you. I got you. So I want to ask you some questions and I want you to respond in chat. Which one of these 4 choices do you agree with? I'll read them just for the sake of the recording. Which do you agree with? A, including students' performance with soft skills in the grade is just as important as including performance on academic content. B, grading is less accurate when behavior is included in the grade. C, it's important to give students a bump in their grade when it's clear that they put in the effort. D, I agree with all of these statements. Respond in chat. And don't be like afraid, like, I'm not gonna, you'll be fine. Okay, C and B. Okay, let me go back up. I got a lot of B's. I got a C and a B. Okay, I got a C. I got an A. Okay. Okay. Now I'm going to ask you a second question. Out of these 4, which one do you think is the most equitable answer? I see that, Javier. Thank you for that contribution. You agree with all of them. Okay. And it's okay to have different answers here, by the way. I'm just gauging where you are. It's not a gotcha moment. B and C, D. Okay. All right. So I'm going to give you a situation and then I'm going to come back to this and ask the question again. Okay. You all are students in my class. Okay. You all are students in my class and oh, absolutely. And I'm an overthinker. So yes. All right. You all are students in my class. We are going through an assignment, a project, if you will, that takes multiple days. Okay. And let's say, just because I know you, Chandra, I'm going to pick on you. Let's say Chandra's coming to my class. She's one of the students in my class, and she's had a really rough time at home. Let's just say, let's say she's tired when she gets into my class and is not able to perform that day, but she knows the content. She's not able to perform. Now she's a day behind. But she goes back home and can't catch up for whatever reason. Let's say the devices aren't working. Let's say there's technological things. Let's say that she has to take care of family members. Let's just say there's a hard time at home. So now she's a day behind. and is catching up, trying to catch up. But the deadline is Thursday. And now she's up against the deadline. And I'm grading, okay? And then let's say Dr. Bashir, because I know you too, sir. He's in my class. And Dr. Bashir, not only is he able to work in class, but when he goes home, he has an older brother or older sister who can help him with the material and adequate resources at home to be able to engage and get further ahead. But the standard is that they complete this task to be able to show proficiency with writing an argumentative essay. Okay, that's the task. And at the deadline, Chandra can't get it in. Not to the standard for which I know she's able. What do I do in that moment? Like, as an educator, and I really want you to answer this question for me. What do you do if you're encountering that situation? Talk to the student, give an extension, student interview, assess in a different way. I love that. I extend the deadline. Good. Provide the student with an alternate opportunity to demonstrate skills. Love it. I think all these speak to the nuance of providing that opportunity. Give an extra assignment. Okay. I know teachers right now who exist in classrooms, let's just say possibly at a school that I work at, who will give that student a 0 because they did not turn it in on time. What have we assessed with the 0? Like, if the standard is that she's supposed to turn in a paper that assesses how she does on this argumentative essay, and we have done the things and she does not turn it in, is the 0 really showing me anything? Like, does the grade mean anything other than here's this timeline that I've given and she doesn't give it about a timeline, right? And now here's the rub with that. And I know, because we're teachers and we have to provide structure and we have to have a means of control. And I get it. And these aren't necessarily bad words, but they have been taken, you get the idea. But the problem is when I give that 0 or I penalize their score because now they haven't handed in the timeline that I've given them, then what I've done is put them at a disadvantage for something that is literally outside of their control. And so what I need you to do is think critically, because in my opinion, right? And again, equity is something that we're all going to struggle towards. We're all going to fall forward. No one is perfect. Even the people who are giving the training struggle in equity because it is something that we have not seen. So I don't want you to look at me and be like, oh, the expert said this, and then I disagree. You are free to disagree with me. Absolutely. Now we can talk about that disagreement, and I might have some things to challenge you on. But in my opinion, B is the most equitable answer, right? Because when we include those soft skills, it leads to this grading that kind of collapses divergent information. And what I mean is we now have information about the students that lead to this inaccurate or confusing or misleading grade. Because let's say student A got it in on time and they got a B, because they haven't necessarily attained to the standard. The rubric was given. I've given clear directions about what those things lie in, but student A didn't turn in on time and also got a B. If the standard is that I'm measuring against this rubric, this exemplar that I've shown, and now I've given both students the same grade, then what does that grade actually mean? It means that I've accounted things that should not be included in the standard. And so when we judge a student's effort, that's highly subjective, because what does effort look like? I have students who are in my class, who have been in my class, who literally doodle the whole time I'm talking to them. But they can tell me everything I've said, and they could teach it to somebody else. So does effort for them look like their hands are folded, they're in star? If you're at a school that does that, cringe, sorry. Your hands are in star and you're looking at me and you raise your, like, does it look like that? Right? But the student who's doodling can tell me every single thing. And so we have to broaden our scope with what it looks like for us to judge effort. Matter of fact, I'd contend that we probably shouldn't include that in how we're grading, because that's highly subjective. Highly subjective. Absolutely. Doodling has been improved. Yes, absolutely. Yep, a lack of data. Do not give a 0 or F. Absolutely, Jessica. Thank you for that. Yes, I know people who are doodlers. Absolutely. In many classes, engagement looks like assimilation. Absolutely. When I speak in front of audiences, and this happened, and if I'm speaking to an audience that looks more like me, it's a dialogue. People are talking back to me. Happens all the time. I love it. It's just what I'm used to. If I speak into an audience that's more my majority counterparts, there's silence. But they'll come up to me after and be like, this was such a great presentation. And I'm like, man, I did not know, because it was so quiet. Does that mean that one's engaged and the other is not? No, I have to provide for the diversity of what that looks like. Okay, all right. I want to keep going, but we gotta keep moving. All right, which do you believe about your grading? A, there is no maximum number of students who should get an A. B, when a student assigns an F, they send an important message about the seriousness of the class. C, the grade distribution should generally follow a bell curve. Or D, grades are based on external standards. There is no minimum or maximum number of students who can qualify for a grade. Okay. All right. Looks like we have a consensus. Okay. Good, good, good. I know teachers right now. Are you overthinking it again, Sandra? I know teachers right now who believe A, because they believe that assigning a grade of an A to a bunch of people says something about how the rigor of their classroom. That if everybody achieved an A, then it says something about who they are as an educator. And because their teacher identity is now tied to the grade that they give, they now grade more difficult, right? They hand out certain things because they say, you know what? I need to know that I'm making this something that students have to work for. And so one of the things that we have to do as educators is we have to decenter ourselves in our grading. Our grading can't be about our, I'll come right back to that, Jessica, I see you. Our grading can't be about our teacher identity and our significance as an educator. It has to be about the student, the standard, and how they're going to get there, right? How they're going to be more proficient at the skill that we're giving them. We're trying to convey. I've had to fight about this with my AP. Teacher at my school said, because too many students earn an A in my AP. Okay. So people are critical about what students are getting. And this is where we have to have data to back up why we're doing what we're doing, right? This is why we got to be, especially when you are going to be a standard bearer for change, any type of change, deviation from the norm, people are going to have contention for you or have some type of disagreement. So we got to back up what we do. If all my students received an A, I would pat myself on the back. I feel you. I feel you. When we limit the number of students who receive a grade or believe that Fs invest in our grade, we are really subscribing to this early 20th century belief that said that intelligence is fixed. Right? That everybody has a certain level of intelligence and it has to be distributed on this bell curve, which has been highly disproven. Right? I do believe C. Okay. I believe that all my students should have A's. All my students have A's, and I'm doing a disservice by not giving more challenging projects. Okay. And listen, I think there's room for us to have that tension. Hear me. The thing that really helps us, or that delays the process towards liberation, is when we think that it has to look one way. I am all for differentiated liberation. But what that means is we really have to hold those things in tension. We have to doubt our doubts. We have to walk in a radical humility that says that possibly, just maybe, the beliefs that I have might be tied to something that I need to let go of. If we're not willing to do that, like think about this. We as educators are telling students, you don't know it all. I can help you learn and grow more and put you on the path to critical thinking. But then sometimes we step in the seat of, I know it. I know what I'm doing, and I don't necessarily want to grow. We may not say it that way, but we exhibit it with our actions and with our attitudes. Got you. Small classrooms are not statistically significant. Yeah, I got you. I got you. Generally speaking, the ideology is that we need to, that grading should be significant of the fixed intelligence that people have. And so trying to debunk that there. So pull this straight from Grading for Equity, which is a resource that I recommend to every single person who's here. There are 3 pillars. All right. We're going to talk about each of these. Grading should be mathematically accurate, bias resistant, and have motivation. So when we talk about mathematically accurate, they should reflect only a student's academic level of performance. This means removing behavior, right? Having soft deadlines, right? We can't get over, like, the reality is we can't get past deadlines. At a certain point, the market period is going to close, right? So let's be real. Yeah, I have to give you a deadline, but it may not have to be on that Thursday, for going back to the example with Sandra. Maybe I meet with her and say, okay, what does it look like for you to be able to do this within the next week? How can I help you do that? Does it mean you need to come with me at lunch? Does it mean we need to provide an extra space at school because home isn't working? What does that look like for you, so I can then measure you against the standard and not against your barriers that you're existing in, right? That you're struggling with. But also they should be bias resistant. This is a big one because we all come in with biases. All of us. Particularly, so I'm going to reference another book that I read called Transforming School Culture. And in this book, it talks about 4 different types of teachers. Okay. You got your survivors. They're either trying to survive the day or the year. I think a lot of us might fit in that category after post-pandemic teaching, right? You got your believers. There's a certain category, I forget, that's for the newcomers. And then you got your fundamentalists. Okay, those 4 categories. There's really 2 camps that exist that are trying to pull for the culture of a school. And you got your believers and you got your fundamentalists. Here's why I mention this, because those who have gone through traditional school and excelled sometimes believe that our kids need the same exact thing. And so they'll say, I excelled at this. Why can't you excel at this? And so they don't necessarily account for the privilege that they've been given, the difference in life, the difference in situation, location, all the variables that come into play. And they say, this should work for you because it worked for me. And they teach that way. Those are more your fundamentalists, right? And that comes through in grading. Because if I had to do, these kids need tough love. And so I'm going to hand them this grade, and they'll learn and they'll grow, and I'm going to give them life lessons. Instead of really saying, okay, here's the standard, here's where we're going, here's what that looks like, and I'm going to help you get there. If you don't get there, yeah, your grade's going to reflect that, but you have the opportunity to improve. Right. And so in the book, he talks about grades reflecting or representing a student's current level of understanding. Now, here's the rub, and I'm gonna round out our time here, move through this because I see it's getting close. Here's the rub that he presents in this book that I want to pose to you, and I think we'll get into it in Q&A. And you could just kind of write it down and sit with it for a second. But he talks about how when we average scores, when we average our grades, and the effect that can have when we have students, for example, like going back to the analogy, let's say I gave Chandra a 0 for that assignment because she couldn't hand it on time. And then I average her scores. She now has that 0 in her average that isn't necessarily reflective in what she can or cannot do. Right? And so he talks about it being a current level of mastery. He talks about using summative assessments in that way to kind of reframe the paradigm about how we look at grades. It's really, really insightful and really challenging. Here's what I know, we still exist in schools that don't do that. So how can we make this a reality for where we are? I think there are small, subtle things that we can do. And I want to start kind of with feedback. But the last thing here he says is motivation. Yes, the book that I mentioned was Transforming School Culture. And the book that is about these equitable grading is called Grading for Equity. It's listed right underneath the picture by John Wiley, excuse me. So I want to suggest two things that you can do today. And then I'm also going to give you in chat a link to some resources for further, because we're not going to be able to solve this in an hour, right? Like, as much as I'd love to be able to. So I want to suggest one thing that I think will be helpful. I want to suggest the way we give feedback. I think about your experience in school. I think about mine. Thank you so much, Dr. Bashir. When we give feedback, especially because sometimes we're grading and it's a bunch of papers and you took them home on that Friday and you said, I'm going to do it. And they came back in your bag on Monday and you're like, man, I still got to get through them. There's deadlines. The AP or the principal is on my back about the grades being in. And so you just kind of fly through them, right? That's typically what happens. I want to suggest to you that our feedback is most effective when it's provided as close as possible to the work that's completed, right? That's a given. But I also think that we need to make sure our feedback is specific. Here's what I mean. Sometimes we write things like, good job. Sometimes we get frustrated and we get that look on our face and we're like, this makes no sense. Sometimes we write stuff like that, especially in the red markers or red pens or whatever we use, right? But what if we reframed our feedback to specifically identify strengths for students? What if we specifically identified areas for improvement? What if we made the feedback actionable so that as their time, energy, and existing knowledge goes into the process of doing the thing that we're asking them to do, and then they produce the work, that our feedback helps them do it better, that it builds a motivation for improvement, because that's the process of learning. Fail forward. I don't care if you fail. What we've done with grading is we've made it a final indicator in what a student can and cannot do versus an indicator of where you presently are and then saying, how can we get to where we need to be? Listen, I told you there's room for disagreement, but let me acknowledge that. I'm sure about that. I think taking grades away takes away the rubric that students and parents use to gauge how they're doing. There is not a true assessment, and there will be no accountability when and if they don't do well in a summative. Got you. I want to clarify that, and I want to hear from you to make sure I got that right. So I'm not going to answer it now, but in our Q&A, I'd love for you to oh, that was at Timothy. My bad. Okay. Well, we're going to talk about that. Let's get into that in a little bit. Okay. And so I think that feedback is something that we can do when we make it specific to what a student needs to improve. When we talk about the way that they are, they process their argument, maybe we can ask more questions in our feedback. What are the components what components should we be listing here of a great argument? What are the things that, right? And asking them to draw back to the notes or to the things that we've given them or the resources that we've handed them. We can do a better job of giving feedback that helps students improve upon things, right? And so this also goes to the thing that we say all the time, and I think it's in like every school: growth mindset, growth mindset, growth mindset. I'll leave that there. But feedback should focus on helping students improve without simply pointing out their weaknesses. Typically, we'll grade and then we'll say, this was wrong, or especially in math, right? Because in math, it's like, I'm a math teacher, been a math educator before I stepped to the principal seat, and either you get a right answer or you get a wrong answer. And it's easy to just give you a little red X or whatever when you do something wrong. But what about thinking through where the strengths lie in the algorithm? What about thinking through where their weaknesses lie and saying, oh, I see why you got this answer, but think about step one again. And so absolutely, Absolutely. And then also consider the context, right? Teachers should be mindful that students may be facing challenges that impact their performance, right? And when we do that, we need to provide feedback and be open to accommodations when necessary, And here's why this matters. And then I'm gonna round out our time because we got 15 minutes and I want to make sure I honor your time. I found out that colleges are opting to continue the end of 2023 test optional, meaning they don't have to take the SAT, which means they're leaning heavily on grades, which means if we don't design or have in our design of grades and how we do grades an equity mindset, then we are saying something about who should get in and who should not. Right? There's major implications for how we do grading. Secondly, learning gaps. My God, if I hear learning loss again, I mean, learning loss is like was the hot button topic. But I think focusing on mastery gives more accurate data, right? Versus, the traditional grading that says, all right, you got this wrong, got this right. That's just what it is. Versus, okay, did you get to the skill? Did you attain to the standard? Which says a lot about rigor, by the way. Picture went out. It says a lot about rigor because ultimately, let me switch. It says a lot about rigor because ultimately what we do is sometimes say, all right, we're going to provide more rigor by giving more problems, but not necessarily attaining to the standard. So, and then also our DEI-J efforts, more than black boxes and things on a website that we say we want to be about. Are we truly providing equitable evaluations that are less subject to our unconscious biases that we walk in? But we have to acknowledge that ultimately at the end of the day, we all come in with a set of unconscious biases and we have to be doing productive, reasonable work about counteracting those things. So I want to open it up for Q&A and get into more dialogue because I know there was some great conversation here in the chat that I did not get to. Dr. Bashir, am I cool to just kick it to Q&A or did you? Okay. So I want to open it up for Q&A. Before we do that, and then we have to log off, I do want to ask you if you stay connected. I gave you where I'm at. Stay connected with me and also a scan there that you can give me just some feedback. I'd love to always continue to improve in my craft and what I do. So if you just take your phone, scan that, it'll open up to a Google form. The form goes 1 through 5. So you got to swipe if you're on your phone to the right. If you give me a 5, if not, you're giving me a 3 and you said I did okay, which is all right. Just give me, feedback on that. All right, Q&A. So people have some great things to say. And I want to, thank you so much, Javier. I want to open it up for you. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Is that all right, Dr. Bashir? So I can see faces. All right. Let me know if I could stop sharing. Everybody's good, had a chance to scan. Yes. All right. If you need it back, I'll share it again. Questions, comments, concerns. I don't like what you said. Anything like that.
How can we make sure educators focus on the why and not just the strategies that come in the book? Because I've noticed just giving them strategies, it doesn't always stick. Whereas when they have the why, we're doing these things, it tends to hold true a little bit better.
Yeah, I try to live in the why, because the what's going to change, right? And we know this in education. Also, I'm putting a link in chat to resources for you that I've organized that help us think through these a little bit more. So there's actual, exemplars in there of how to do certain things. So I would love for you to just take that, copy it, put it in your own files for you. But yeah, so we talk about I say this all the time, belief precedes behavior, right? If we believe better, if we truly believe better, it changes how we act, it changes what we do. So if I said to, and this happens all the time, especially in equity work, we'll say, all right, we really want to think about grading. We want to think about who's passing, who's failing. We want to look at the data. So we look at data and then we say, okay, well, there's some narratives here we're saying about who's passing and who's not. And then teachers respond by saying, all right, I'm just going to make sure I pass everybody. Or I'm just going to make sure I pass these students, and I'm not going to, because what they're saying is I can't do my job and I'm not, but these students can't read, or these students can't do that, or these. And the moment you say these students, you're revealing something about what you believe that affects how you're behaving. And so we got to start there. Let's start with what we're saying about students, the deficit narratives we tell ourselves all the time. And listen, I'm telling you, as somebody who's on the screen talking about this, I do it. I did it today. And I had to counteract it. I had to think about it. I had to reject it when it came up for me. If we don't get to that level of work, none of this stuff matters, because we'll be doing it from a place of performance and not necessarily a place of conviction.
So I'd like to have a little clarification on what Timothy and Sharonda was saying about the grading. What were you like, what you guys were talking about? Were you saying that you don't think that we should give grades at all and just grade a summative?
Oh, she didn't ask me. I'm gonna just sit here and listen. Go ahead.
Okay, am I on?
Yes.
Okay, well, what I'm talking about with regard to that, in the assignments that I make, I allow students to turn in an assignment up to 5 times. All I do is provide feedback to them. I do not provide a grade to them. They get feedback. And that helps them so they know what they need to change in order to improve the product that they're trying to give me, whatever kind of product that is. So they're receiving assistance all along the way. And then finally, I get to checking to see whether or not they actually learned this after they get the assignments completed, because I believe that anybody who does not actually finish an assignment and to get it correct still doesn't understand the assignment. And just telling them what they did wrong, at least in my practice, has not indicated that they will then do it right the next time, because they typically ignore the red marks that are put on it. But if you give them feedback and allow them to submit it multiple times, there's less pressure on them and they slowly improve until it is actually a good product. And then I have summative assessments for each of the units that I have to see whether or not they have achieved it or not. And they can actually take those tests multiple times. So one of the things that I find that is trying to test and check whether or not they have learned the material, at the end of a term, they may know the first material very well by then, but they got a low score on it at that time. But by the end, they know it. So are you trying to measure the cumulative amount that they learned? Then they should be able to take that first test again and show that, yes, I know that first material. Now, of course, that requires that you have some kind of automated grading system. Otherwise, it's impossible. And that's what I do.
I was about to say that.
I'm teaching computer science and I develop automated grading.
Got it.
Yeah. I mean, I understand what you're saying about the feedback, because I also teach computer science, and I was like, okay, well, the kid turns in a project. It's like, okay, well, you were missing all these things on the rubric, which means that you get this score.
Yeah.
Go back and go ahead and do it again, and they go back and do it multiple times.
Yeah.
That's cool. But we still have accountability for our administration, right? We still they still want to see grades. But that doesn't mean that I'm not giving the student the opportunity to redo it and redo it and redo it. And then what I would love to avoid in a perfect world is I don't have all these things to regrade right when the report card is about to end. But that's the reality of it, because I want to make sure that they all have this equitable chance to, put in their efforts on whatever they can do. But it just appeared to me, or maybe I just assumed that, like, you have no grades at all.
Summative assessment.
And how do you keep accountable with parents, and how do you, because parents and administrators, that's how they measure how good your students are doing. Are they getting A's? Are they getting B's? And it's, for me, they're like, oh, like I started at a new school and they're like, oh my God, your kids were not doing great at all. And they were all failing, but now they're doing all great. I'm like, yeah, because, They, at the beginning, they don't know my teaching style and they're like, whatever, teacher. And it's like, okay, do it again, do it again. No, do it again. No, do it again. You could do it. Oh, you know, so a lot of encouragement, but it seems kind of like we're like doing the same thing. But I do have to put grades in there, but that doesn't mean that it stays there. They can go back and they can redo the assignment.
Right.
And,
And I'm teaching at the university level. And the units that I have are approximately 1 week long. And I create the amount of material that fits in a week for them to be able to do, get feedback on, and then be able to take an assessment. But I allow students, as I said, to take it many times. So sometimes I have people as much as 5 weeks behind. Now, there is the final deadline that they know about. And that's the reason that I have to have automated stuff, because the last 2 weeks are extremely busy with students finally deciding to take the assessments and do assignments. But again, I have automated tools that assist me in providing feedback.
Yeah, that I get. That's a little bit different cookie than teaching at a high school where you have parents,
Absolutely.
you know, peering over your shoulder and administrations and everybody and their mother looking over like, what are you doing in here?
Absolutely. I'm gonna jump in real quick and I'm gonna go to you, Chandra, and then I see Dominique, you came with the camera. So I'm assuming you have something brilliant to say. So I want to hear that. But I want to say, like, there's room for that, right? Like our landscapes are going to look different, which is why I push for feedback, which is something I think is actionable, something we can do, right, where we are. And then I'm talking about soft deadlines that allow for a student to then say, okay, how can I improve this with the feedback to then attain to the standard to then achieve the subsequent grade. But we're like, especially in K-12, you can't escape wherever you are grades, but we can't change how that looks. And so that's what I want to push us to change and to play with that tension a little bit. Go ahead, Chandra.
So I firmly believe we need to get rid of grades, and I hate them with a passion. I could write a dissertation on this, because if you research the origin of grades whatsoever, you will find that they're based in eugenicists, and you will find that they were actually created to further marginalize our already marginalized communities. So in understanding that, and I have a real problem with assigning letters and numbers to students, because that doesn't tell them what they learn. That doesn't like demonstrate anything about their abilities and their growth. So what I started doing, and I stole this from Sarah Zerwin, because I do have to put in a grade, which I don't like doing. Their grade, and they know this, is essentially a loading bar. They get a 1 or a 0.5 because I don't do zeros. And that 1 means it's done. And they're in learning goals, not like homework, participation, quiz grade. I don't give quizzes, I don't give tests. So they have that loading bar, and their end summative assessment is they have to submit a portfolio and then write a letter of evidence and talk to me and tell me what grade they think they earned and how their portfolio demonstrates that grade. And that's the closest I've been able to come to truly like demonstrating what kids know and understand. And those letters have been amazing. Like they've been the best like evidence of how kids have grown and learned in my classroom.
I want to say first that I totally agree with what you just said and what Javier affirmed about the 0. Like, they don't tell us anything. If we can find a way that works for us in our classrooms and with the systems that we've been given to do away with how we administer zeros for things like that, I think you know we're still stepping in the right direction. Dominique, I want to go to you, and then I'm gonna kick it back to Dr. No, you good? You sure? Okay, all right. Dr. Bashir, I'm gonna kick it back to you, sir. I want to honor time. We have 7:58.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And thank you all for such a great conversation in the chat, here in the Q&A, you know, during the presentation. You know, these conversations don't have to stop here. because this is something that's really important. You can continue these conversations with your colleagues, with other team members that you may know, and start to get them thinking about, how they're assessing and how they're grading. Excuse me, their students, or what's happening at other schools. So these conversations definitely don't have to end here. I thank you all so much again for your time and attention. And if you could, just one last thing here, there is a brief survey. I'm actually going to put the link in the chat for CSTA purposes, just so we can, make sure that we are creating content for you all that is of use, and you all like, and we definitely appreciate Mr. Morgan coming and joining us this evening and talking about grading. So if you would just go ahead and fill out this form, just talking about your experience and how you feel about the learning series this evening. I would greatly appreciate it. We are at the 8 o'clock Eastern hour, 7 o'clock Central. And again, I just want to thank you all for coming. And if you have any questions, Mr. Morgan, if you want to drop in how they can connect with you, that would be great. You can connect with him. And I connected with him via LinkedIn, and I'm sure he wouldn't mind you all doing the same. So thank you all again. Really appreciate it, and have a wonderful evening.
If you search Liberation Lab on any social media platform, I should come up, as well as on LinkedIn. I should come up there as well. But yeah, man, thank y'all so much. Like, I'm honored that y'all spent this time, especially on a Tuesday. If you're like me, you just started back at school. This was your first day and you decided to come here. Man, thank y'all. You honor me and I appreciate it.